Hello and welcome to the That's So Craven podcast, your Fulham podcast from Down Under. Another big club controversy as Fulham go down 1-0 to Liverpool, a dubious penalty decision that went against us, as we saw the week before as well, or maybe not the week before, but as we've seen multiple times this year, another big club gets a call in their favour, and Fulham unfortunately lose out against Liverpool. Here to discuss the whole thing with us, we have Elton. How are we going?
Hello, otherwise and sometimes known as Dad. I'm well, thanks.
Yeah, it feels weird to introduce you as dad every time. Otherwise, everyone's just going to start calling you dad, and you just lose your identity. But anyway, Sammy, how are we
Yep.
going, Sam?
Dad is dad. Dad is dad, and that's how I always see it. But yeah, I'm good, and I'm better now that we've established that dad is dad.
Pod dad. We can
Pod
make
dad.
that happen.
Pod daddy.
So, guys, another game where we sort of walk away and we can't be too disheartened by the performance itself. We played against Man City last week. Well, not last week, on the weekend rather, and then Liverpool a couple of days later. It looks like a really tough run of fixtures. To go down in both games by a single goal actually just shows how far we've come, especially when you consider the lineup that we had out there last night, where we saw no Tim Ream, no Pereira, no Mitro. We obviously had the return of Willian to the side. We had the return of Wilson as well to a bit of full fitness, but we're really playing with quite a number of key players missing and still putting in good performances. Dad, is it encouraging for looking forward towards next season, I guess, when you look at the performances that the rest of the squad are starting to put in?
That's actually an interesting question. It's probably not how I was thinking about it. I was thinking more in terms of how proud we must all be of these incredible performances against really big clubs, top teams. I think, obviously, given where we are at the moment, where our cupboard is very bare, and there's these players that perhaps were considered to be largely bench players are now really being relied on, and they're stepping up, and it's really good to see. And in that context, for next year, I think it bodes really well that the likes of Harry Wilson, who let's be honest, 6 weeks ago, if you weren't writing him off, you were thinking about him only as a bench player and wondering about his future. And I think that's changed, and it's a great thing that it has changed, not only for his personal career, but for us, for sure.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, we not that long ago were talking about how in the summer we'd probably be looking at offloading someone like Harry Wilson. But Sammy, have you been impressed with his performances, especially in recent weeks? He really seems to have come good again.
Oh, Harry Wilson specifically? Yeah, massively.
Yeah.
I mean, I was convinced and already pre-lamenting the loss of him and thinking I emotionally prepared myself to be like, oh, what could have been? No, I think he's come on leaps and bounds. A pretty poor attempt of an assist last night, but aside from that, I think Harry Wilson has kind of like actually cemented himself in the starting lineup now. I'm sounding very Gary Lineker right now. But yeah, no, I think Harry's great. I love Harry.
He's definitely found the form that won him so many plaudits when we were in the championship. He really struggled after coming back from that injury, which is understandable because it was such a serious injury to have to overcome. And we saw a real lack of confidence from him in those first few weeks, maybe even months after he properly returned to full fitness. But we are starting to see that more confident side of him. And he does now look at home in the Premier League. And it really is what could have been kind of feeling this season when, I don't know the exact number of games Mitro's missed through injury and suspension for the year, but by the end of the season, it's got to be probably close to 15 games.
It's huge. It's really big.
40% of the game, or 30-40% of games missed for Mitro this season. And
That's
considering
crazy.
the fact that he scored a fair few goals in the games he did play, then we look at the fact that we didn't have Manuel Solomon, Harry Wilson for big periods. We had Polina banned for 3 games across the season, although I think that's going to be a seasonal thing. We've now lost Tim Ream and Pereira for a large chunk of well, not a large chunk, but for the rest of the season. So we're talking 6 games basically that those two are out. It's actually been quite a brutal season when you look back on it, and that we're sitting where we are. I think it doesn't actually show how hard we've had it this year. It feels like it's been a fairly easy run, but when you consider, pre-World Cup, we were really nursing Mitro through an injury. I don't think he was playing. I don't think he was training most weeks. From what I understand, he was maybe doing one little session the day before a game just to prove that he could actually see out 90 minutes, but effectively didn't train all year to try and make sure that he played at the World Cup. We also had, obviously, that big gap in the season where the World Cup was. It's been a really disrupted season for Fulham. And like you said, we really should feel proud for the way that we've come through this season, despite all the issues that we've had across the whole year, to be sitting in 10th place, looking fairly comfortable. I know we're on a bit of a run at the moment where I think we've lost 7 out of our last 9 games, but we'll come to a tweet that I saw that puts a lot of that into some perspective as well. Let's actually look at the game itself. So obviously a 1-0 loss to a Salah penalty. We will talk about the incident in a fair bit of detail because it is the main flashpoint in the game. But Dad, I'll go to you first. Up until that point where Liverpool took the lead, how did you feel Fulham actually played in this game?
Oh, well, you asked me 2 different questions there, but up until that point where Liverpool took the lead, look, we were in it. It was an achievement. What was it? The 39th, 37th, 30, I think they scored in the 36th. Sorry, 39th. The incident occurred in like the 36th minute, and the penalty was taken in the 38th, 39th minute. But make no mistake, we were under huge pressure. We were absorbing a lot of pressure, and we were working really hard to stay in the game. We were doing brilliantly. I thought defensively it was a little bit untidy. I thought obviously there's a lot to talk about in terms of Issa Diop's involvement in that penalty, but I thought he was a bit slow to start. Some of his passes were a bit underhit. Some of them fell into quite dangerous areas when he tried to clear the ball. It didn't seem to be quite on it, and he, for me, built into the game, and he had a pretty good second half. But overall, given who we were playing at Anfield with a pretty rousing crowd behind the home team, I thought it was a pretty good effort to go 36 minutes and keep them scoreless. So, regardless of how you want to overanalyze that first, quarter of the game, I thought we did pretty well, really pretty well.
Yeah, Sammy, Dad sort of touched on it a little bit there. Your thoughts on how Diop and Tosin played together, because obviously they were thrown in together after Tim Ream's injury in the Man City game, but this is the first time this season, apart from I think maybe one of the cup games, that we've seen Tosin and Diop actually partner together. Firstly, how do you feel about that partnership itself, potentially being our starting partnership going forward for a fair amount of time into the future? And secondly, how do you think they dealt with what is a pretty tricky Liverpool front three?
Yeah, I thought they did really well. I mean, we have to take into account that Diop's been playing. He played out of position last night, so there's always going to be a little bit of a I've lost an adjectives. A growing into that role. But I have every confidence going forward, especially into next season, that they can actually produce some really good stuff. I mean, they nullified Man City, and I feel that they truly nullified Liverpool. I mean, we can totally make the argument that Liverpool didn't really make much of their chances and largely were shooting off target. But I think that came from really good pressure from our back line. So, yeah, I got a lot of confidence in what that partnership can produce. Obviously, I think that we need another centre back to just beef that area up a little bit, with Tim Ream, not necessarily on the decline, but in his twilight years. But yeah, no, I was actually really happy with it. That was the least of my concerns last night. I was more concerned with our front line.
I think a big shout out also to Cedric for his
Yeah,
for his well, I was going to say participation for his effort and
participation.
well I think there's a lot to be said for the sort of synchronicity of a complete backline, and we're focusing on Ream perhaps not being around, well, definitely not being around at some point, and how Tosin and Diop are going. But you got to also remember that those guys really know Kenny Tete, and they trust
Yeah.
him, and they rely on him hugely. And Cedric brings something else, and they've got to get used to playing with that guy. So I think overall they did incredibly well.
Well, that's definitely another thing to consider, the fact that this was a back four that definitely wouldn't be used to playing alongside each other. When you make two changes, someone like Kenny Tete, who we know how good he is, and has just been a regular started on the right for the whole season, we just have faith that Tete is going to be starting at right back and have faith in his ability there as well. You throw Suarez in, who hasn't really made a huge impact yet, hasn't played a huge number of games. You throw him alongside Tosin, who again is coming into a bit of form at the moment, but again hasn't played for the majority of the season. It's been Ream and Diop for most of the season. Then you take Diop, who's actually had quite a stint out of the side. I think he hasn't played in the last, I don't know how many games, maybe 6-7 games. When Tosin and Ream have been the preferred partnership. And then Robinson, who is so used to playing alongside Tim Ream, for the national team, for Fulham. They have such a good partnership and bond together. And now he has to get used to Diop being next to him. It's a big change for that back four. And we do have to tip our hats to them because, geez, they put in some really good performances against two of the best attacking sides in the league in Liverpool, who belt teams for 7-8 goals fairly regularly, even when they're not performing that well. And Man City, who have Haaland, who just broke the record for the most goals in a season, and he's still got 6 games to go or something ridiculous like that. It is something we do have to acknowledge and just say, Fulham actually did incredibly well to only concede a handful of goals across these couple of fixtures, because it could have been a lot worse. And we've seen teams as good, if not better than Fulham, concede far more goals against these two sides. So it has to be considered a fairly good performance. Obviously, the goal, is controversial. Let's get onto it a little bit, and we'll talk about the actual incident itself and how it came about. We see the ball sort of pinging around the penalty area. It sort of gets cleared out. Fulham win the ball back. It drops back to Tosin on the edge of the box. He plays the ball across to Diop, who is looking up for the next pass, but dallies fractionally on the ball. It's a genuine mistake. Darwin Núñez is fast. He gets there quickly. He nips the ball away from Diop. Diop has a big swing to try and actually hit the ball and play the pass. The ball's already been tapped away from him. The two of them make contact, and the referee almost instantly blows for a penalty. Sammy, I'll just get your view first on the penalty itself. What were your thoughts?
I think it's bollocks. I think it's massively bollocks. I think you've done very, very good at being very open-minded and very politically sound there, my brother. But no, I thought it was bollocks. I mean, like, you can clearly see that there is zero intent from Diop. He's not even looking. He's not even looking at Darwin Núñez. Like, he barely even registers that he's there, aside from like the pressure that it's giving him. Darwin Núñez basically swings into him. I think they literally like graze thighs, if anything, like the top of each other's thighs. I refuse to accept that as a penalty. I think it's a ridiculous decision. I don't usually get that up and on about these kind of like things, but it does kind of fall into like very precious treatment of top 6 teams. And I think it was it's just gross, isn't it? It's just real icky. I don't like that. And especially in a game like that, where we played really, really well, and I was really proud of the guys, to kind of cop that. It just leaves a yucky taste in their mouth. And I don't like Liverpool that much anyway to begin with, so it was doubly annoying with that. Dad, you say things now.
Well, Jack and I had a long conversation about this
A long
early on.
yarn.
Yep, and so I know his view on it, and I think
Well, give
well,
your
my-
view on it rather than the
Yeah.
one from what we.
yeah. I so firstly, let's make no mistake about the fact that Issa Diop made a mistake. He that has to be articulated. So Tosin passes the ball to Diop. Some say underhit it, but actually, when you watch it again, he didn't underhit it. Diop allows the ball to roll past him because he wants to bring it onto his left foot. So and it wasn't moving fast enough for that to really be an okay thing to have done. So he's actually and all credit to
Nunes.
Darwin. He actually pounces and he accelerates really
Yeah.
quickly and he runs. He runs across, but kind of at Diop. And and he cleverly taps the ball away as Diop finally realizes the moment is there when he realizes he screwed it up and he tries to recover and he's got his head up and he's looking for the pass, as Jack mentioned. And then he tries to have a swing at it, which is what he should have done about a second earlier. And of course, the ball's tapped out of his path. So it looks like, well, it is a fresh air shot, and it looks like he's kind of kicking at Nunes. Now, there's no suggestion that he's kicking at Nunes, and the accusation is that their thighs have collided, right? Now, and then we go to the ref calls the penalty, and it goes to VAR, and VAR obviously technically that their remit is to decide whether it's an absolute howler and whether there in fact has been no contact or not. And there clearly has been some contact. So technically, I understand why VAR can't overturn it. That is the part that absolutely infuriates and frustrates me because ultimately I feel like the system's been played. Now, I'm not calling it cheating, but it's kind of
I'm calling
Nunes
it
has
cheating.
been
I call that cheating.
no. Well, it's kind of simulation. It's clever simulation. He's not dived into free air, but he's arguably in the air when he hits Issa Diop's thigh, and he's arguably on the way down when he hits Issa Diop's thigh. You can tell I've looked at this a few times, like quite nauseatingly, a lot of times, right?
Because it's clever cheating, but it's still cheating in my opinion.
Well, it's gamesmanship to a degree, right?
Of course,
because he's run at a defender. He spotted the opportunity. All credit to him because it's very instinctive of him. He spotted the opportunity. He runs at the defender. And what the hell's a defender to do other than to clear the ball? Now, if he touches the ball, there's still contact there, right? Because Issa Diop cannot get out of the way, and there's a connection to the Tim Reams thing. But anyway, look, I'm blowing up. Gadget.
Well, look, it's definitely it's a controversial one at the end of the day. Like, I don't think there's any clear answer on a penalty like this. Firstly, Diop makes a mistake there. I'm sure he's ropeable about it. It's a genuine mistake. The striker does really well to nick the ball away. Nunes is quick. Like I said, he gets there first. Diop is looking up and just doesn't know where the ball is, which is why he takes a wild swing at it. Unfortunately, Nunes is just a little bit smarter and makes contact with. And I say makes contact because he does angle his body slightly to make sure he makes contact. One thing I will say, if that happened in the Liverpool penalty area, and Vinicius is the one who taps the ball away from Van Dijk, and Van Dijk takes a wild swing, and Vinicius makes that same contact, we would be ropeable if that didn't get given as a penalty. And I think that's something to consider here as well, because yes, it's a soft penalty, but I think if we had that happen to us, we'd say it's a penalty. It's just a soft one. And we can't get ourselves up in arms over the fact that we gave away a penalty, and the striker himself was actually just smart about it and won the ball back. He made what is effectively a good tackle, and then Diop, unfortunately, was in the process of trying to swing at the ball and completely missed the ball and took the player. So that happened elsewhere on the pitch, you'd probably give it as a foul. It happens in the box, and they get a penalty for it.
One thing I think, when on reflection, one thing that I'm really infuriated by, and it's not about what um, Darwin did or what Issa Diop did or whatever, but perhaps not even the ref's instinctive reaction, because the ref, I think his instinct was there contact? Yes, it's a penalty. Let VAR tell me I'm wrong. That's basically what they're doing, right? And that's his job. What I really am unhappy about when I think about it is this whole contact of, if there's contact, it's definitely a pen.
Yeah.
Because I really hate it. And you can call me, you can have a go if you like, but the amount of contact in the box, on corners, on two people going for the ball. Look at Bobby last week. That was kind of waved away as, oh, you're both involved in it. But that's a huge amount of contact. And if you're actually going to judge a penalty as being valid or not on the basis of contact, I think you're in a really dangerous area.
It's really
FA.
annoying as well. It's like due process and like malicious intent. And it's
Mhm.
we're getting to a stage now with like penalties, and it's so I can't even be really that arsed talking about it because it's just so
Well,
boring.
you
But
say
like
that,
it's like
Sammy, but
yeah,
the meaning of it, it's 70% on average, unless Metro's at the spot, it's a 70% likelihood it's going to be a goal. So it's a
yeah,
huge significance. It's the difference often in the outcome or the result of game. So it's massively important, and you've got
yeah.
to get it right.
Well, I'm talking more about just kind of like constantly going on about like the same thing and going on about the ethics of it. But like there needs to be um like set a different kind of standard in this regard, especially with things like VAR, because if we're talking like light grazes in like the same way of like tennis where it's like literally in by like 3 uh, centimeters of like a ghost's shadow or whatever, like if you can, it's just manipulating the system, and I don't like that. Yeah, it's like manipulating the stock market. It's like, yeah, you can do it, and yeah, in theory, it's smart, but it's still gross.
One thing I'll say is I think that gets given as a foul anywhere on the pitch. I think if that happens in the middle
Really?
of the pitch, that would get given as a foul. Diop takes a big swing at a ball and misses it, and Nunez goes down. Yes, maybe he pushed his body into Diop to go down, but it looks like a foul anywhere on the pitch, and there's contact. So I think that's a foul. The other thing I'd say as well is I'm less annoyed about penalties that are given. I'm more annoyed about the penalties that aren't given. I'm
Yeah, that's
more,
fair.
and I think the Decadova Reed one last week was a penalty on reflection, but I'm more annoyed at the times when there's corners and players have hold of each other's shirts, and we saw the
Yeah,
one in the United game where Mitra gets the big push in the back and nothing's given. I'm more annoyed
yeah.
at that than I am against about penalties like this, where there is some sort of contact. It's soft, but you could easily argue that being a penalty. And I think in this case, I'm not happy about it, but I think it's a penalty. It's a soft penalty, a very soft penalty. But and I think it's controversial because it's Liverpool, and Liverpool do get these decisions in their favour more often than other clubs do, and teams in the big six and the top six sides, or whoever you want to call them, but the ones who seem to always get the results in their favour, these penalty decisions do go for them more than they go against them, and that's what annoys me. I don't mind giving away penalties sometimes, but I do mind it when penalties aren't given because you don't want to give teams free goals against the big six. That's when it annoys me. And look, through the season, it does even out. Look, there are some games where we've had decisions go our way more often than not. We've had some possible penalties, go in our favor, and where we've. I think there was one a couple of weeks ago, and it definitely looked like Tosin took the man down, and we kind of got away with it. And it does even itself out, I think, over the season. I've seen charts before on VAR performance across a year, and there's a couple of clubs who seem to benefit from VAR more than other teams do, but it does level out over the course of a year. And I think it's worth just remembering that, and remembering that this is a soft one and we can be annoyed about it, but I think at the end of the day, for me, it is a penalty. It's just a really average feeling to have it happen against us again.
Do you also think, is there a correlation? Everyone talks about the big six buyers. The big six also happen to have the biggest six stadiums and huge followings, right? And imagine, Liverpool in full voice at Anfield, and something happens in the Liverpool box, and the crowd roar. Are you telling me that the cortisol level of the referee isn't somewhat increased by that, and he's not actually sort of more reactive because of the atmosphere?
We need to
Maybe
get AI.
that's
We need to get AI referees, just soulless referees that can just do the rules. That's what I want.
I mean, they're only human, and forget the unconscious bias
problem.
or favoritism. Yeah, you know what I'm saying. I think it must be incredibly difficult, but they're almost getting bullied.
But then it's above. You should be above that,
But
and
they're human beings. They're human beings.
Well, they're worse. They're referees. But I know. Controversial. Just lean into the controversy as much as you can. No, it's
You're
just
gonna have refs all over you during this week, Sammy.
Oh, bring
Yeah,
it on.
that's okay.
Bring it on. I'll take every one of you. But it's just yucky, isn't it? Like any kind of scenario where you feel that it's being manipulated just purely based on a bias. Yucky. I don't know. It's yucky feelings. But anyway,
I think it is always be difficult when you're in. They describe these places as cauldrons. You're in front of 6,000 fans in some of these stadiums who are all baying for blood, and I can't remember which one of you said it, but fans hate referees because referees, unfortunately, make multiple bad decisions across a long period of time, and people remember it. Tell me a Fulham fan who's going to get the name Chris Kavanagh over the next 10 years. There'll be one. And, certain clubs hate certain referees because of major decisions that have been made over the course of the last 10, 15 years. A referee doesn't want to walk out of the stadium and receive abuse afterwards. So they are surely careful about the decisions they make. If that penalty decision doesn't get given, the referee walks out of that stadium to constant abuse, to things being thrown at them, and receiving direct messages on Twitter and saying, "I'm going to kill your family," because unfortunately, that's kind of what referees have had to put up with. And I don't think it's right. But at the end of the day, these guys are professionals. They get paid a fair whack of money nowadays to do their jobs. They travel all around the country and get put up in fancy hotels. They, get to go to the World Cup if they're good enough, and Champions League, and they're professionals. Their job is to make decisions. And it's just shocking how many bad ones they make. And it gets picked out in the Premier League every single weekend, referees making poor decisions. And I don't want to be the podcast that is constantly hanging shit on referees, but it does feel like we've definitely copped a bit of a shit rub in the last 8 games since Mitro. Everything happened with Mitro. And even before that, when we looked at some of these matches and we're committing 8 fouls and picking up 5 yellow cards, and the opposition's committing 20 fouls and picking up 1. It just feels like there's no consistency through decisions, through it's frustrating. And I don't want to continually harp on about this and
Go on,
harp on about
let's be that
Just
podcast.
just give it like another 15 more minutes. Why not?
I don't want to. It's depressing because
It's
you
so
watch these
depressing.
games and you get your hopes up to get wins against big teams, and what a result it would have been against Liverpool to pick up points, and who knows what would have happened if we'd gone in at 0-0 at half time.
Yeah.
Against Man City, who knows what would have happened in that game before the World Cup, where De Bruyne goes down in the box like he's been shot, even though he barely got touched. We take points off Man City across. We could have potentially taken 2 draws off Man City this season.
Do you know
But
why I love being a fan?
because we didn't.
Do you know why I love being a fan? It's the epitome of saying, I hate this thing. I never want to speak about it. And then just constantly speak about it as much as you can. It's like the opposite of like positive therapy. It's like talk therapy in like a way that just burns your soul.
It's what every cricket player says during a cricket season at least once, and golfer and pretty much any other social sport. I hate this game. And yet you come back every single weekend. And it does feel a little bit like that when these kind of incidents happen. But look, let's move on from it,
isn't it?
and let's talk about the rest of the game. Second half, Fulham actually created a few chances, and I want to focus a little bit on Carlos Vinicius, who, like I've said it a couple of weeks in a row now, has been a bit of a whipping boy for us and for most Fulham fans this season. And again, we have to go to him with our hat in hand and say sorry, because he put in a ripper performance. Dad,
really did.
On how well Vinicius played, and how sort of surprising it is considering some of the performances we've seen him put in.
Well, when you look back on it, is it any surprise? He's clearly a very emotional guy, and emotional people can be pumped up, and he really gets pumped up for these big games. He loves it, absolutely loves it. And it really seems that, there was one moment where we were breaking out of defense. He made a pass, and I couldn't believe how fast he charged down the ground. I don't know if you remember seeing that. He's pretty quick, and his effort was unbelievable. I mean, I think his hold-up play was exceptional. Some of his passes, Jack happened to walk into my house as I was rewatching one of the little highlights packages. Deft passes, like beautiful first hit passes that he was laying off.
It was the first time pass down the wing to set up what was probably Fulham's best chance of the game, where Willian dinks a ball over the top to him.
Beautiful.
And without any second thought, and that was the thing about it. He didn't dilly-dally on the ball. It was instantly knowing exactly what he wanted to do and executing it to perfection. It's just such a shot. It's like Vinicius
high class.
Vinicius plays against any team in the bottom half and looks like a bit of a donkey out there sometimes. You put him up against a world-class defense, and all of a sudden, he turns into prime Ronaldo. Sammy.
I was just going to say, he's like Phil Collins, because everybody rips on him. Everybody says that they're not necessarily a fan of him, and everyone's got all the criticism in the world. And then he drops the Tarzan soundtrack, and then you go, I can't deny it. He's bloody good.
Oh, and
even if it's just for that moment. If it's just for that moment, it doesn't matter.
I still have this feeling. I know Vinicius started out life as a defender, if I'm correct. And he's obviously now a striker, and a very much old school type striker. I can't help feeling that he's actually an attacking midfielder.
It's like Phil Collins. He started out as the drummer of Genesis, and then he dropped In the Air Tonight. It's like
gradually
moved
moved
himself
forward.
Yeah.
Look, he had a really good game.
Yeah.
He will go down in cult lore. He has to go down in cult lore now of just such a weird time for like Fulham, and just such a wonderful little B story in there. Like I love him. I love him.
But last night, and it's been a couple of performances. It's not a flash in the pan. And last night, I really started to think, geez, maybe he is actually a really good backup for Mitro. If if Marco can somehow work some magic on him and make him believe, because it's a confidence thing. Look at how Harry Wilson was just deftly laying the ball off when we were breaking forward a month ago. He's never doing that. He's actually knocking the ball back into defense when he gets it, petrified of making a mistake. He was, and I think that's a lot. Well, we all know that confidence is about fear of failure, right? It's probably not so much a fear of your own ability, but it's about the fear of the moment of not doing the right thing and not actually pulling it off. And when you stop thinking about it and just do it instinctively, these guys are all good players. And if you know your team, you know how the system works, and you stop overthinking it and just get in the moment and do it, see what happens.
Thanks, Carl Young.
Sammy, Dad made a bit of a mention there. Do you think that Vinicius could be our backup for next season?
Oh, you know what? As much like for the banter, I would love it, but realistically, let's take a breath here and just realistically just weigh up what that option is. I would like somebody more consistent and more established, and I could be completely wrong about this, and then he could maybe even go to, I don't know, somewhere like West Ham and then fully develop and become this amazing, well-rounded player. But from everything I've seen at this stage, I don't think it's fully enough for us to sign him. That's my personal opinion, but I love him. I love what he's bringing to the club. I just love who he is. But
if he played with that level of energy and that level of confidence,
oh my god! But that's not what he does. You know?
No, but I think I would back Marco Silva to get more out of this guy, because
totally.
Are you challenging his skill?
No,
I think in the air there's potentially a problem. He's not as good as he could be. I think he's got good feet. I think he's got very good vision. I think he's got good vision.
But I think he is. I think he's so kind of like confidence driven, and he can really, really get up for it, and he can really, really surprise. But for me, it's really that consistency, and it's like I love how he rocks up to big games. But does big game? Like we were talking about it last week. I don't think big games really win seasons.
He's young. He's young.
I know, of course. He's actually not that young. He's not that young. He's about 27.
My biggest issue that I have is he's not scoring goals.
Yeah.
I think he's got 3 goals all season from 20 appearances.
Maybe awesome
even
goals.
Pushing 25 appearances. Great, memorable goals against big teams, but he's just not scoring enough for me. I think, if you're a backup striker, you probably need... I mean, from your main striker, you probably want a goal every other game, which across a full season gets you close to 20 goals. For your backup striker, a goal every 3 games would probably be okay. Maybe even a goal every 4 games you could get away with, but that would be somewhere between 5 and 10 goals for Vinny this season. And he's obviously lacking. He hasn't got the finishing that we're wanting at the moment. And look, last night he put in a couple of good shots on goal, but we did sort of speak about it when I was around at yours earlier, Dad, and that first shot he took in the first half where he takes it from the edge of the box, maybe he could have done something different there, and maybe a more established striker does do something different there and puts it in a slightly different spot rather than effectively just swinging and trying to hit the ball across Alisson, which would have to be a wonder goal to score from there. And then the big chance late in the game where he gets played in by Willian, he does really well to get into a great spot. He's 6 yards out. You should probably score from there. When you're 6 yards out,
well, we were saying,
you need to be beating the keeper.
We're saying Metro's turned that in and beaten the keeper, low, hard, and in under Alisson's arm.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, we were talking about that for the final chance of the game, which we'll come on to now. Actually, we can wrap it up and just say how unfortunate it was that we didn't have someone like a Mitro or a BDR. Well, sorry, not BDR, Mitro, or maybe even Vinicius on the end of that cross from Dan James right at the death. You'd back Mitro 9 times out of 10 to turn that one into the back of the net. Unfortunately, BDR is well pressured by Van Dijk. And again, I'd say the size difference there probably didn't work in BDR's favour. Mitro probably puts that away and we possibly walk away from that game with a draw. Disappointingly, he's unable to, and it was a good chance. And I think Fulham have to say, they actually got a fair few decent chances in the game, and unfortunately weren't able to take any of them. So, look, a disappointing result, but I think a good performance from Fulham. A quick look at some of the stats. Fulham with 43% possession to Liverpool's 57%. Both teams only had 3 shots on target. Fulham had their 3 from 9. Liverpool had theirs from 15 shots on goal. Looking back, I mean, Liverpool's 3 shots on target. One of them is a penalty. Can't really remember the other 2. I don't think Leno was massively tested all game. Liverpool with more passes, 613 to 455. That's expected when the possession is as lopsided as that. 7 corners for Liverpool to Fulham's 5. Fulham just the 8 fouls, 10 for Liverpool for the game. So, guys, let's move on. We asked for a few questions. We've got one here from Steve Reynolds, who's also following along on the live stream. G'day, Steve.
Steve.
A question here. Steve is at SteveJesk24611 on Twitter. It says, another VAR decision goes against us. When will VAR advise the ref to review it? And if any doubt, do not award. We would be 7th taking those for and against this season. And look, Dad, you and I talked about it a little bit before this podcast and how I'm less annoyed with VAR as a concept as I am with the actual rules around VAR and how VAR is to be used. VAR in this instance is to be used for pointing out clear and obvious errors. I don't think the referee made a clear and obvious error. I do think if the ref had gone across and looked at the screen, though, and actually watched back the replay, he may have had a different thought about if this was a penalty or not, and may have looked at it and said, this is just too soft to give. Sammy, your thoughts on that? Are you still a fan of VAR even after all of this kind of stuff happens?
Yeah, actually, I'm a fan of VAR, but I'm a fan of VAR when it's actually used. I almost felt like it wasn't really. I don't know. Maybe it's my bias just creeping in, but I just feel like if it was reflected on in VAR properly and not with haste and with care and taken into account like intent and things, I feel that VAR wouldn't have called that. Like, so I'm still very much for VAR as a concept. I think it actually. So here's the annoying part. In theory, it's supposed to benefit teams like us, but it doesn't. It benefits teams that are more swayed by public view, for lack of a better word.
Well, it's supposed to benefit every team. It just doesn't ever seem to benefit us that much.
Well,
we've had some pretty horrible VAR calls this year when you consider the West Ham handballs, the Man City penalty, this penalty just not getting picked up by VAR. I think it feels like we've had a pretty rough rub of the green. I mean, for VAR picking up offsides, that doesn't bother me because you're either onside or offside. I think if VAR picks up that you're offside and you're pissed off about not getting awarded a goal because you're offside, it doesn't matter. You're offside in the first place. Like you can't argue about that. It's in or out. It's black or white. Penalty decisions are just not black and white. They're down to the opinion of the referee. And VAR doesn't seem to be used right. I completely agree with you. It's just not utilized properly. Dad, do you agree with that, or do you think bin VAR? You're an old man. It feels like that's an old man's response.
No,
I don't like change.
That's a sledge.
Yeah, it really was. I'm just going to ride over the top of it. But I do like VAR, but I think I'm with you. I just don't think 2 things. I think not only is it not being used properly, I think the rules aren't correct. I think the remit of the VAR team isn't right. I think we also talked about this, that it seems that there's far less occurrences of the ref being asked to go and view the monitor.
Mm.
And maybe that's like a policy and advisory that look, don't do that. If at all possible, don't do it. It slows the game down. We don't need that, so they don't. And you know what? The real heart of it for me is that if we're judging this penalty on whether or not there was contact, VAR can clearly work that out, and there clearly was contact. What pisses me off is the intent, which comes back to the whole idea of simulation. And for me, if you run at a defender and he can't get his body out of the way, and you actually cause an impact, regardless of whether the ball's involved or not, that really annoys the life out of me, because it's gamesmanship. And I get it, everyone does it, and the best strikers do it better than bloody Fulham does it. And I guess that's a frustration as well, because we don't do that very well. There's not a single person in Fulham that does that. You know,
Mitro
I reckon
goes down a lot.
No, but
Yeah, he
not
does.
like that. Not like that. I mean, Mitro doesn't charge at players and cause an impact. Mitro's always claiming that he's been manhandled. Now, if it was physical contact, you cannot tell me that Mitro isn't on the receiving end of huge physical contact. He's involved as well, obviously, but that's just ridiculous. I mean, where are we going to end up with this? You know, they're scragging each other to the ground, and the ref goes, "Play on, you're both in it."
VAR for me right now has kind of become that ex-girlfriend where you just keep on going, I don't know where I went wrong. And then you bore all your friends about it. And then they go, Sam, stop drinking and telling me your feelings. You know, that's what VAR is for me.
I think
you
you
lost
talk
me
about your
there,
ex-girlfriends a bit too much, Sammy.
I'm just trying to be relatable to the people. There's more lonely people out there than happy.
Not many people have that many ex-girlfriends.
And I see
No,
you.
well,
Yeah, that's
no,
true.
no. Well, actually, what he knows is that his girlfriend's never going to listen. So
That's
That's
true.
true.
That's true. Yeah, I've been
Yeah.
told that.
yeah, I guess I'm ultimately voicing a frustration with the great difficulty in truly picking up the nuances of gamesmanship and where there's intent to simulate, which is really well hidden, and basically everyone gets done.
Yeah, and look, a comment here from Steve Reynolds on the live stream. The VAR ref was also the fourth official for the home game against Liverpool. ... Conspiracy time, Sam. And look, I never want to get too deep into these conspiracies because that's what they are at the end of the day. But like we did mention, it does seem to be that the big six get favoured and get more of these decisions than the rest of the teams around them. And you do have to start saying conspiracy at some point, but
you just don't want to be that guy, even though you are.
Yeah. We're not
I'll
a
be that
conspiracy
guy.
podcast.
I'll be that guy.
So,
Conspiracy.
Sam, you can ask your friends at TIFO to do a conspiracy podcast at some point.
Oh, please get me on. Please get me on. I will work there very happily. Conspiracy.
TIFO slut. Anyway, let's have a look at some of the top tweets from last night. We got a fair few to get through, so let's crack on. At Peter Rutzler, our good friend from The Athletic, even though he's not covering Fulham, still tweeting about Fulham straight after the game.
And even though we've never met him, but we can still call him our good friend.
He's our good friend. He's a friend of every podcast.
I didn't say he was a bad friend. I'm just saying we've never met him. So technically he's a friend. Think Liverpool got away with that. Not just saying soft penalty. Fulham had chances. Frustrating, period. Their ruthfulness, do you like the dramatic way I'm reading this? Their ruthfulness in the first half of the season was key to good form. And I think they've just lost that bite in recent games. Otherwise, it was a solid performance away at Anfield.
Beautiful.
And I think never underestimate how hard it is to go to Anfield, right?
Yeah, of course.
I think we can also put down some of the poor performances recently to the issues we've had throughout the season. Like we said, there's been a number of injuries. The first half of the season, we were fighting hard. And I'm not saying we've been on the beach, but your attitude will obviously change as you move closer to to safety, and we haven't had as much to fight for because we're not fighting for our lives, and we're not looking behind us at the teams coming up to overtake us. So it is a bit of bite that's been lost because we had a lot of fight early in the year, and you lose a player for 8 games, you lose your manager on the sideline. It will take a bit of bite away from you, and it is a solid performance away at Anfield, and like you said, it's a tough place to go. I'm looking forward to seeing this team build next year and having a fit Mitro for next year and having a few extra players added to this squad to actually see if we can push further and turn those good performances into actual points. The next tweet, I clicked the button and it didn't work. Let's have a look. This one's from Anthony B at Fulham Flutter on Twitter.
Facts will state we've lost 7 out of our last 9 league games, but context is often more important, isn't it, Sam? Sam loves that.
I appreciate the more dramatics of the previous tweet, but anyway, keep going.
I was getting a bit of contrast.
All right.
Victims to multiple abnormalities you rarely see happen in a short period of time. Top scorer 8-game suspension, manager touchline ban, referee corruption, broken arms and ankles. And back to the point that probably links both of these tweets. I don't think we're on the beach. Marcus Silva was very, very offended by any suggestion that we are. Maybe the lack of motivation because we didn't have enough to play for. But I actually honestly think we were truly rattled by what happened up at Man United, and I'm not surprised. I think everyone expected us to be professional and push through, but it really rattled us. It really did. And why wouldn't it? It was very dramatic. And it hung around for a couple of weeks, It wasn't cut and dried and done and dusted like a red card, off you go, come back in 3 weeks. It was dramatic.
I honestly feel that we haven't fully recovered up until the Man City game. I feel that the Man City game was a serious turning point for us, where it was like, oh no, we lost, but still so proud, and there was so much to look forward to, and it's like that is the Fulham that has got us this far. But yeah, there's how many games between Old Trafford and City? Like at least 6 or 7, right?
Five maybe, because
5 or 6.
5 or 6. I still think realistically we're not fully recovered. We don't have our best player back. One of our best players back. So it's obviously going to take a massive toll on the team when you and like this tweet really succinctly puts it. Your top scorer is banned for 8 games. Your manager's away from the touchline for 3 games. We've had referee decisions go against us. We've had injuries go against us. We've lost 7 out of our last 9. If you looked at that on paper, you'd go, geez, this is a club in absolute crisis. But we're sitting here over the last couple of episodes and almost sitting back and laughing and feeling comfortable and feeling great about how everything's going at Fulham at the moment. And yet around us, the world is on fire. So it's kind of a bit of a narrative of how our season's gone. It says, like you say, it says heaps. We're actually comfortable, and we're looking forward to next season because we're in a really good spot, and we're actually managing to be fairly stable at the moment, which is a good thing. And so I'm looking forward to seeing us next season with maybe a bit of consistency, not losing 2 of our best wingers before the season even starts, not having an unfit striker for the whole year. It's exciting just thinking about it and looking forward to it. Moving on, another regular tweeter we have featured on our show, Tom Rogers FFC at Tom Rogers 24 on Twitter.
Can't fault the performance. I don't think anyone had a bad game, to be honest. Beaten by the officials, but also on another day we get a point. Alisson made 2 good saves from Vinicius. Bobby Decordova probably should do better at the end too. Yeah, I think we're probably in broad agreement with all of that, aren't we?
I'm still on referee corruption. That's one of my favorite phrases now.
Yeah, I'm going to put you in contact with Ref Support UK. They are a Twitter troll who I think you'd really enjoy talking to, Sammy.
Bring it.
Next up, I've got 3 tweets here that I've put together. It's all about Carlos Vinicius, who for me was possibly man of the match. I think Anthony Robinson was officially given Fulham's man of the match for the game, but I think Vinny could have got it as well. We've got tweets here from Sahil at MUFTIPKS. I don't know if the Mufti Picks, maybe. Nicholas Carey at Carey Nicholas on Twitter, and Ibs at FFC_IBZ on Twitter.
IBS.
So Sahil says,
Sahil?
I know he was absolutely diabolical against Villa. Even I was very annoyed. But Vinicius has actually been very impressive in his last 2 games. Little Brazil flag at the end there. And from Nicholas Carey, Vinny was very good again, but fans won't praise him. I'm not so sure about that, actually. I think fans surely will recognise and give him props and credit.
We spent the last 40 minutes.
To be fair, I haven't seen that much. I haven't seen as much as he probably deserves on Twitter since the game. I think he deserves to be shouted out as one of our standout players for the game who really affected our performance a lot. I think Robinson is probably a fair call for man of the match, but Vinny was a very close second. But it's true, he hasn't been mentioned that much. And I think it's possibly people who've been, saying get rid of him all season, feeling a little bit sheepish about coming out and going, actually, he had a really good game. So I'm glad we've spent the time to actually acknowledge that he played really well. And this is a different Vinny from a Vinny we've seen in previous performances.
Which is a lovely segue to IBS's tweet, which says, I have to apologize to Vinicius. I'm starting to think our team and our manager may have just unlocked the Brazilian flair. He may just be the suitable backup. Makes things very interesting in the summer. That's what.
It's definitely a conversation to have in after the season's finished in June, when we start to hear about players whose contracts aren't getting renewed. It will be interesting to see how we handle the Vinicius situation, because he's not looking like a terrible backup now. When he plays at this level, he definitely looks like someone who could do it, but I'm just not sure if he's consistent enough, like you said, Sammy. And one thing I will shout out as well, Ibs and Nico Carey had a bit of a to and fro after this as well, because both of these guys actually did back Vinny through the majority of the season, even through some of those poor performances. So hats off to those two for seeing something that no one else did.
One thing I will say that might potentially work in his favor is, obviously he's on loan from Spurs. Is he on loan from Spurs? Is that correct?
He played. He went on loan to Spurs.
Went on loan to Spurs. All right. So wait, have we fully signed him, or who's he on loan from? He's a loan player.
I think we bought him, didn't we? How we bought him?
Yeah, we bought him.
Did we?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, how good would it be if he's not our man, and let's say he's not, and he goes to a top flight championship club, and starts. No, top 4 championship.
Top championship team, yeah. Look, he's definitely someone who I just double checked that we signed him on a 3-year deal with an option for a 4th. So he's around. Even for the whole of next season, realistically, we see Fulham often do this, and they will instigate that option before his final season of his contract, so that he can't effectively just leave on a free. But we did pick him up for free from Benfica. He scored goals while he was at Benfica. He had 34 appearances, 18 goals, so he can definitely do it. And look, I agree. He is 28, so he's not young. But I think if you hold on to him and potentially keep him as a bit of a backup, maybe he does go on loan to a championship team next year and get a bit of goal scoring confidence, because his loans since he's been at Benfica, he spent some time at Tottenham where he was again a backup. He spent some time at PSV. He did start a fair few games, but he was there on a 2-year deal. It got cut short early, so I don't think they really rated him that much. Scored 6 goals in 24 games. Maybe he just needs a bit of backing, and maybe he needs some time at a club like Fulham, and maybe we send him out to, a Middlesbrough like Muniz went to. But again, we can see sometimes that just doesn't work out. Muniz has barely played all season. I don't think he's scored any goals all season either. So it is a bit of a risk. I think, considering we picked him up fairly cheap, and I don't think he's going to be on massive wages, you probably do keep him as a backup. Maybe he doesn't actually play that much, but he's still there if you need him. And I think he's proved that he can sort of do it as well. I don't think he can fully do it, but he can play a role.
For me, he's my third option. And that's like, I don't mean that as a diss. I see him as like a third option striker. I feel like there needs to be someone between him and Mitro.
Do we want to talk about Icardi now?
Oh, well, that got shot down very quickly, not long afterwards. And look, there's a few people as well pointing to some of Icardi's off-field incidents, which I won't go too deep into, but I don't think that one's going to happen. But it's a player of that kind of quality that we should be looking at. Someone who's a proven goal scorer, maybe a little bit older, but who can come off the bench. I'm not saying these people as such, but blokes like Cavani, who went to Man United and has scored goals in the past and could do a job and maybe be a little bit happier being a backup in their twilight years. But someone who is smart and can get into the right positions that Mitro also gets into, and therefore finish goals and keep the same style, but happy being a backup, but a backup of real quality. So, look, I don't know. And I think it's something we're going to discuss in the off-season a fair bit, because I don't think we'll be selling Vinicius. I wouldn't have thought so when you're on a 4-year, or effectively a 4-year deal. It doesn't really make sense to sell after one. I'd say we'll give him another season. And look, if it's not working out, he probably goes in the January transfer window next season. If it is working out, he sits as a handy little backup, and maybe he is a third striker to someone coming in like a Gyökeres from Coventry, or Ben Brereton Diaz from Blackburn, one of those guys who comes and joins Fulham as the proper backup striker.
What I was going to say was that if you compare and contrast him to Muniz, who also came in for a season and then got shipped out the other end, he's actually on a better trajectory.
Oh yeah,
and he's actually showing some promise. He hasn't scored many goals, but he scored some very big time goals, and he's actually been quite impressive in big games against big oppositions, right? So if he can actually pick that up and someone can believe him in on the back of that in the championship, he might actually get a full season playing in a winning team in a system that works for him. And who knows? Who knows?
Also worth noting, Muniz he's only just turned 21. He joined Fulham at 19, so he's still very raw and has a long way to go. And I don't think we've seen anywhere near the best from him. And I hope next season we find a better loan deal for him if we decide to send him out on loan again. Because look, it's a real shame that hasn't really worked out for him, especially considering the talent that I think he could potentially be. He's just not quite there yet. So it'll be interesting to see how we play that next season, if we keep Muniz in and around the squad and see if he can be a bit of a backup instead. On to the next one. Another one here from IBS at FFC Ibs about Sasa Lukic this time.
Slowly but surely, we're seeing the Sasa Lukic from Turin. Thought he was really clever in the midfield against some battlers in the Liverpool side. His connection and link-up play will improve in time with the right-hand side, Tete and Wilson. I thought he was good last night. I thought the midfield had a very tall order with Liverpool stacking 4 across there. And that was pretty hard work for our guys. But I thought he looked pretty good. He still doesn't look quite up to speed in the Premier League.
A fraction
for me.
off the pace.
Yeah.
But there looks like there's some potential there. He looks a bit underconfident to me as well,
I think he is. I mean, Yeah, it's a completely different league, completely different expectations. Italian league's much slower. Like I think it's, I don't know. Isn't there like that statistic where like in the Premier League you only get like 3 seconds, and in the Italian league you get like 4.5 or something like that when you have the ball?
You're just making up shit, Sammy, but that's fine.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Look at Torino
I
as
don't
well. We
believe
have
that.
to remember he was at that club for 7 years, very well established, was playing really good level of football, playing in Serie A for that amount of time, 150 Serie A appearances, a few European games as well in there. Like, it's tough when you leave somewhere where you are kind of incredibly comfortable and you come
Like a
into a brand
Kearney
new
leaving.
league. Yeah, I mean, it would be like, even some of the great players, when they go and play in a completely different country, they really struggle. You look at blokes like, this is weird throwbacks, but guys like Alexis Sanchez, who are superb playing in Italy and then come to England, and all of a sudden they're just not the same. And it happens, and I think we just have to accept that it will take him a bit of time to get used to the way teams play in the Premier League. It's very different. It's the same as when teams move from the Championship to the Premier League. It takes time to adapt. And I'm liking what I'm seeing from him. I think that's the biggest thing about this is we're starting to see those little glimpses of Lukic where, those highlight reels that you see all the time and you get really excited about a player. We're starting to see some of those little moments and seen it with a couple of little passes he's made, just some of his movement, getting in behind a few times. I really like it, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of it. And hopefully we see a bit more of it before the end of the season as well, now that we have that relative safety of being able to do so.
To be honest, I reckon he needs I think he needs a preseason, and then once he has that, I think we're going to see a serious player next season.
He just needs time with the squad, as any new signing does. And there aren't many players who come in a January and really change a team and really make an impact. It's a really tough time to join a club. You come in mid-season, the team's been playing together for like 6 months because of pre-season by that point, and you're thrown into the deep end having played in a completely different system and said, hey, play in this system now and make it work. It's tough, and I think he's done a really good job. Look, at another one here from @Harry Fremantle on Twitter.
Anthony Robinson back to his pre-World Cup form. Incredibly impressive this evening. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. He was really, really good. And one guy we haven't mentioned, who I thought was absolutely outstanding, and I do love watching him, was his buddy down the left, Willian. I thought Willian was incredible last night. His turn of speed at his age is incredible, and he's tricky as hell. And the way when he drops that shoulder and runs into the box, he looks so exciting. And just his skill in midfield, actually releasing players, is hugely impressive. He's still got it. I know this is about Anthony Robinson. I've just talked for a minute and a half about Willian.
Thanks for really spruiking how great Robinson was by talking about Willian instead.
Yeah.
No, but I do agree with this. He is actually back to it. I think we saw bits and pieces of that in the Man City game. And he looked red hot last night. He looked really up for it, and he looked really sharp. And he was gunning up and down, absolute engine.
Yeah,
How's your turn of pace, Jack?
It's not great, not like that anyway. It definitely, not that long ago, we were bagging Robinson out. His positioning was off, his passing was poor, his crossing was poor. He's really turned it around in recent weeks, and maybe he listens to the podcast. I'm not sure. I have to check the stats. But look, he's definitely improved, and as Harry says here, he's back to that form before the World Cup, where he would have been one of the first names on that US squad for the World Cup, I think, alongside Tim Ream as well. Those two were outstanding early season. They were really proving that they're high quality players who are capable of playing at the very top level. And we saw such a drop off after the World Cup, and it might be a bit of fatigue. It could be anything, but we are starting to see that Robinson, and we start to understand why he's rated at 30-40 million as a really solid left back option, and I like it. It's good seeing these players playing at their very best again. It's kind of what we've come to expect. So it's nice when that actually happens and you see them coming out on top. Now this one is a bit controversial. I've put a handful of them together here. I might help you in reading some of these out, Dad, because it's a bit all over the place. This is to do with the comments made post-match by Tom Cairney and also by Marco Silva as well. And I wouldn't be overly surprised if there's potentially more action taken after these, because we know the FA love to rag on Fulham and take us down. I'll read out the first one here, which is a tweet from Fulhamish at Fulhamish Pod on Twitter. Tom Cairney post-match. This is part of his interview with the BBC post-match. He, referring to the referee, said they checked it, but he said second half to one of our players that it wasn't a penalty. So Tom Cairney, in his post-match interview, effectively said that the referee came up to one of the Fulham players, not sure who, and admitted that the penalty that he gave wasn't a penalty. And potentially he looked at the replay at halftime and maybe realized that it was a bad decision. I don't know if you've seen some of the screenshots taken that have been shared around on Twitter, the fact that the referee is standing a solid 30 meters away from the incident when Nunes actually gets fouled in the box. And there's also, I think, Lukic and Palhinha in the eye line between the referee and the incident, which is why it's a bit interesting as to why it didn't get checked by VAR, because the referee possibly didn't have a clear line of sight. Another tweet here from @GoldieGold55. Soft as butter, but Diop was clumsy and Nunes made the most of it. Can see why the ref gave it. However, if I'm sitting in VAR and watching it in slow motion, I'm in the ref's ear. Was it a clear and obvious mistake, though? And that's kind of what we were talking about before. Was it a clear and obvious mistake?
Was there contact? Yes, there was. Was it forced? Was it simulation? That's my question. Was it simulation?
It's hard to say, and it's all opinion at that point. So I don't think it's a clear and obvious mistake if it's an opinion.
Yeah.
It's messy. It's messy.
I want a wearable lie detector.
It's another one here from Emma Sanders at @M_Sandy. Fulham boss Marco Silva to BBC. That penalty, when you lose a game in football to that penalty, is embarrassing, I have to say. When you have the referee, then the VAR to help the referee, it is embarrassing. And finally, one from Ash Wolford at Ash W. Wolford on Twitter, friend of the podcast and host of FA. TC 100% picking up a ban for revealing the ref confessed to his mistake. The FA won't like that one bit.
He's probably right.
And I honestly wouldn't be surprised if there are some repercussions from that, because players aren't allowed to criticize referees, I don't think, in their post-match comments, same as managers. So it'd be very interesting to see if he gets off scot-free from that. I'm not 100% sure he will. Dad, I'll hand over to you, being a South African national, to read out a tweet here from Fulham, South Africa, at Fulham FCZA on Twitter.
Point of order, I was once. It's my country of birth, but I'm no longer a South African.
Denounces live on the podcast.
Yeah, denounces live.
A South African national.
Yeah, sure. 1 for Tottenham 2-1, 2 Arsenal 2-1, 3 Man City 2-1, Man United.
Again. Don't read out those. That is way too confusing.
Okay, how about just the scores?
Yeah.
Spurs 2-1, Arsenal 2-1, City 2-1, United 1-2, Spurs 0-1 or 1-0, Newcastle 1-0, Villa 1-0, City 2-1, Liverpool 1-0. 9 games against the current top 6 where we've lost by a single goal. 9, with his head exploding in a little emoji. Marco and the lads can be so proud. Too right.
100% agree. I don't think there's much more to say on that, to be honest. The fact of the matter is, as well, a number of those goals came very late in games. Look at the Man City game, the Man United game, those second and third ones on the list where we conceded effectively in the last minute of the game. Look at the Man City and Liverpool games towards the end there where we've had potentially dodgy refereeing decisions made against us. It has to be said, even though we haven't got results against those teams, we've put in good performances and we've not been outplayed by these sides. So we have to take our hats off to it. You know, Villa, we beat Villa 3-0 earlier in the season and they're flying. Admittedly, they were under a very poor manager in Steven Gerrard, but they're still the squad is there. They're able to do it, and we're still getting wins. So I think it's a good tweak to end on there because it's just proving that even though sometimes the results don't go your way, we should still be really proud of what the team is doing and how well they're performing.
Well, the other thing is that, you know, in all of those games, we never get beyond one goal. But those teams we know are capable of ripping sides to shreds, like, and so this is a massive shout out to Bert Leno again, and our defence, and also Fellaini and Reed for shielding that defence and, you know, being incredible.
But yeah, definitely worth saying because, like you say there, we're only conceding maximum of 2 goals against some of these teams who are just insane attacking teams. Man City, who have this ridiculous animal up front who's scoring goals for fun, and they can't put more than 2 past us and concede both times they play against us. Like we're doing something right. It's just about tweaking it a little bit more for next season to turn it into something really special and potentially finish even higher up the league, which is, you know, kind of something crazy to think about when we're sitting in 10th in our first season back in the Premier League. But I genuinely feel like this team can push even further with a couple of little additions, tweaking the tactics slightly to be a little bit more solid defensively because it maybe can be construed as a bit of an issue, the fact that we are losing against these teams by a single goal. It means we're still conceding. We need to be keeping more clean sheets because looking there, that's 9 games in which we haven't kept a clean sheet. And I know against a lot of the teams in the bottom half, the other 13 teams in the league, we're conceding goals in those games as well. So it proves that a small tweak will actually make a big difference here. And like I said, this summer is going to be so important because I think a couple of little changes, a couple of additions, and making sure we don't lose the core of this group. And this Fulham team could be something really special. I think this could be the team that finishes higher than a Fulham team's ever finished before, gets more points than ever before. We have a higher top goal scorer than ever before. It really is a positive feeling around the group, around the club, around the fans at the moment because we've got a base to build on from here, and I'm personally really excited by it. So, guys, geez, we've been talking for a long time, but it doesn't feel like it because, again, we're coming away from, albeit a loss, a really good performance from Fulham, and we're proving that we can do it with the big boys, and we're proving that we can cause those teams a lot of issues. So I think we should really hold our heads high and look forward to the rest of the season now. We've only got the Man United game as our only real tough game for the rest of the season. Admittedly, it's going to be tough playing against some of those teams floating around the relegation battle, but I really believe Fulham actually have the ability here to pick up a few points in the next few games. I don't know what you guys think, but when you look at the fact we're playing Leicester, Southampton, and Crystal Palace across the next 3 games, and we'll have Mitro back for that Southampton game as well, it does kind of feel a little bit positive. We could potentially see 9 points in the next few games.
Oh, totally.
Well, it would be a huge shame to be able to turn it on against City and then turn it on against Liverpool at Anfield, completely routed in terms of our stocks, and then have a limp performance against a lower table team. That would be really disappointing, and I hope it doesn't happen.
Annoyingly, though, it is something we've seen in the past where we have these really good performances against the top teams, and then it comes down to it, and we play against a team in the relegation zone and struggle. Look at the game against West Ham. some of the other performances this season where we really should be getting all 3 points and just don't. And
Well,
Well-
somber the mood. Come on, big up the boys. We can do
No,
it. We can do it. Come on.
I'm saying Marco gets a couple of speakers and he puts it in the change rooms and he plays this pod and it doesn't happen.
plays a bit of Phil Collins by the sounds of things. That's what Sammy likes.
Oh yeah.
No, look, these upcoming
How
next 3
can
games for the Man United game to finish the season, I genuinely feel like
Oh, did we lose Jack just in the middle of his rousing speech?
Oh dear. Okay.
Oh
well,
dear.
I'm not sure what he genuinely feels, but if he doesn't come back,
Should I just sing
Um,
Phil Collins in this time period? Like, is that how best to end the podcast? So just burst into how can I just
well-
let you turn around?
there's 9 points to
Anyway.
here we go.
I-
Jack, we lost you for a long time, but why didn't you take us out?
Oh, he's
Whoops,
gone.
we've got
He's
lost-
just completely gone. Well, that's
he's
how,
left the
that's
building.
that's how, and I think that we can do an incredible job in this next run of games coming up.
I never
Elton,
thought I never thought he hated Phil Collins that much.
Apparently, he does. Elton, it's been a wonderful time having you on this podcast.
Apologies.
Uh,
the joys of recording live.
That's
the one
okay.
good thing I can
we
say
covered it.
now is at least you guys don't have the 10-second lag I had you on previously. So
mm,
what I was saying there was I genuinely feel like there are 9 points to be had across the next 3 games. Leicester, total disarray. Southampton look like they've given up. Crystal Palace, we're going to see the return of Roy Hodgson to Craven Cottage as a manager, which will be a great moment. But they're in a bit of form, but I feel like they're there for the taking still as well, because I reckon they're going to take their foot off the pedal, because there are a couple of maybe one. Oh no, they've reached 40 points already, so they're effectively safe. I don't think they're going to be pushing quite as hard as they have been for this season so far. So I wouldn't be that surprised if that game against Palace is also there for the taking. And look, even that game against Man United, if they've already locked down a Champions
oh, I'm
League
looking
spot,
forward to that. I'm looking
if
forward
they've
to
already
that.
locked down a Champions League spot, though, they might play some of those young guys. We've seen it happen before. Remember that game Fergie played towards the end of the season, put out a youth team effectively, got battered 8-0 by Middlesbrough. I wouldn't be overly surprised to see something like that happen again. And I reckon Fulham will put out an absolutely full-strength team against Man United as well to try and get a
100%.
bit of revenge for that game. So
100%.
honestly, wouldn't be overly surprised if we took 10 points from the remaining games this season and potentially finished on 55, which would be a record for Fulham. I think, I wouldn't say it's on the cards, but I reckon that's what Silva will be saying to the boys and saying, guys, let's keep pushing here and see what we can do, because we have the opportunity in these next 4 games to take maximum points and really ruffle a few feathers as well. And you're basically building a platform for next season, because if you come off the back of a season like that, finish 8th maybe, you really set yourself up for success, and you show also potential signings in the summer what they're missing by not being at Fulham. So guys, I think before we have another Wi-Fi meltdown and I drop off a live stream, we should probably wrap it up there. Thank you so much for staying up so late over there, Sammy. I know it's almost midnight over in Melbourne.
I tried to wrap it up before. I was going to play us out with some Phil Collins. I had it all set up, and then you came back in with your spiel, which is totally fine. Yeah, I've kept the bedroom a little bit hostage, and it's almost 12 now, so I probably do need to get going. But thank you very much for having me.
I think you should just tell Paris to listen back to the podcast, and she'll really understand why it was so important.
She will never do that. She will
Yeah,
never
fair
do
enough. Fair enough. But no, thank you, Sammy. It's much appreciated you joining. I think this one was worth talking about. And Dad, thank you as well for joining us tonight.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Enjoyed it.
So, guys, the next game against Leicester is on the bank holiday Monday now. So we'll be recording again on probably over the weekend, and hopefully release something around Saturday, Sunday for a preview for the Leicester game. And then we'll obviously review that game during the week as well. So until then, everyone, thank you for joining in, and come on, you Whites.